What if I told you that the cozy sight of a cat curled up on your couch connects you directly to the lives of people who walked the earth thousands of years ago? Picture this: an ancient Egyptian family, their home bathed in golden sunlight, with a sleek feline stretched lazily across a windowsill, just like yours might do today. That's the incredible truth about our bond with animals. It's not just a modern phenomenon, but a thread woven deep into the fabric of human history. From the moment our ancestors first welcomed creatures into their homes, these animals became far more than just pets. They were guardians, symbols of the divine, and even silent witnesses to the rise and fall of civilizations. And here's the most astonishing part: their roles in our lives haven't changed as much as you might think. Take a step back in time with me, and let's uncover the secrets of pets and animals in ancient homes. Imagine the bustling streets of Rome, where loyal dogs stood watch at doorways, or the tranquil gardens of China, where crickets in delicate cages provided music for noble families. These creatures weren't just background characters in human history, they were central to daily life, shaping everything from superstitions to art, religion to household routines. Think about it: how many of us today still feel that unexplainable comfort when our dog curls up at our feet or our cat brushes against our legs? That connection transcends time, and it's a story waiting to be told. This journey isn't just about uncovering forgotten facts, it's about rediscovering a bond that has endured for millennia. By the end of this video, you'll see your own pets in a whole new light, understanding how their ancient ancestors played roles so vital they were often etched into history itself. From the sacred cats of Egypt, worshipped as living embodiments of gods, to the revered falcons of medieval Europe, symbols of power and precision, we'll explore how these creatures left paw prints, hoof marks, and wing beats on the human story. So settle in, because what you're about to discover might just change the way you look at every animal that shares your home today. To understand why ancient Egyptians held cats in such high regard, we have to step into their world, where the line between the earthly and the divine was beautifully blurred. Imagine walking through the streets of Thebes or Memphis, where sleek, graceful felines lounged in the shade of temples or curled up in market stalls. These weren't just animals wandering about, they were living symbols of Bastet, the goddess who watched over homes, women, and children. Her likeness, often carved into amulets and statues, bore the gentle features of a domestic cat, radiating warmth and safety. But it wasn't just about worship. Cats played a vital, everyday role in Egyptian society. Picture a farmer's storeroom where grain was piled high, a magnet for rats and snakes. Without cats, entire harvests could be lost. So when a cat curled up in a barn or prowled the corridors of a palace, it wasn't just a pet, it was a guardian of survival itself. The depth of this bond becomes even clearer when we look at the extraordinary lengths Egyptians went to honor their feline companions. Archaeologists have uncovered vast cemeteries filled with mummified cats, each carefully wrapped in linen, and sometimes even adorned with tiny, intricate masks. Some were buried with offerings, bowls of milk, tiny bronze statues, even mummified mice so they'd want for nothing in the afterlife. And here's something astonishing: killing a cat, even accidentally, could be punishable by death. The Greek historian Diodorus wrote of a Roman traveler who met a grim fate after his chariot struck a cat, a stark reminder of how sacred these creatures were. But this reverence wasn't blind superstition. It grew from a profound respect for the balance cats brought to Egyptian life. They were the silent protectors of homes, the living links to the gods, and the gentle companions who shared hearths and hearts. What's truly remarkable is how this ancient relationship echoes in the way many of us still see our cats today. Think about it. How often do we joke that cats act like they're royalty or seem to possess some mysterious wisdom? That playful notion might have roots deeper than we realize. The Egyptians saw something divine in the way a cat moves, hunts, or even gazes at the world. And maybe, just maybe, we still sense that magic today when our own feline friends curl up in our laps as if carrying the legacy of Bastet herself. While cats reigned supreme in Egypt, ancient Rome was undeniably a dog's world. Walk through the streets of a Roman villa, and you'd likely hear the clatter of paws on marble floors, a molossus, massive and muscular, standing guard by the entrance, while a tiny Melodian curls contentedly on a noblewoman's lap. These weren't just animals, they were woven into the very fabric of Roman life, serving as protectors, hunters, and cherished companions. The molossus, ancestors of today's mastiffs, were legendary for their strength, often deployed in battle or to patrol sprawling estates. Meanwhile, the Melodian, with their delicate frames and silky coats, were the darlings of aristocratic households, their presence immortalized in intricate mosaics where they're depicted lounging beneath dining couches or playfully nipping at their owner's heels. But the bond between Romans and their dogs went far beyond mere utility. Step into the ruins of Pompeii, and you'll find poignant echoes of this relationship, frescoes capturing dogs mid-bark, their collars studded with ornate tags or curled up at the feet of children. One particularly touching discovery, a mosaic at the house of the tragic poet, where a chained dog bears the warning, Cave Canem, beware of the dog, yet its expressive eyes seem to beg for affection rather than inspire fear. And then there are the epitaphs. Romans didn't just mourn their human loved ones, they grieved for their dogs with equal tenderness. One inscription from a heartbroken owner reads, "My eyes were wet with tears, our little dog, when I bore you to the grave." It's a sentiment any modern pet owner would recognize, proof that the ache of losing a beloved companion transcends centuries. Dogs also prowled the edges of Roman mythology, embodying both loyalty and otherworldly power. Cerberus, the three-headed hound guarding the gates of the underworld, symbolized the threshold between life and death, a creature so fearsome that even heroes like Hercules trembled before him. Yet in everyday life, dogs were more likely to be found snuffling around kitchen scraps than terrifying trespassers. Their duality, both fierce protectors and gentle friends, mirrored Roman values of strength and devotion. Even their collars told stories. Some bore inscriptions like, "Follow me home if I'm lost," while others, like one found in Britain, simply declared, "I am called Issa, and I am the puppy of Publius." What's striking is how little has changed. When you watch your own dog sprawl across the couch or alert you to a stranger's approach, you're participating in a ritual as old as Rome itself. The breeds may have evolved, but the roles they play, guardian, hunter, confidant, remain eerily familiar. Perhaps that's why Roman art so often captured dogs in moments of quiet intimacy. A head resting on a master's knee, a tail thumping against a mosaic floor. They understood, just as we do, that a home with a dog is never truly empty. Birds didn't just flutter through the skies of the ancient world, they perched at the very heart of human culture, weaving themselves into myths, palaces, and everyday life with their dazzling colors and otherworldly songs. Take the vibrant parrots of ancient India, for instance. These weren't mere pets, they were living jewels, their brilliant feathers and uncanny ability to mimic human speech, making them prized possessions of maharajas and merchants alike. Imagine a sunlit courtyard where a parrot, perched on an ornate gold stand, greeted visitors with clever phrases, a spectacle designed to showcase the owner's wealth and connection to distant, exotic lands. But their significance went deeper than opulence. In Hindu texts, parrots were often linked to Kama, the god of love, their voices symbolizing the sweet, persuasive power of desire. Meanwhile, along the Nile, the Ibis commanded reverence of an entirely different kind. With their slender, curved beaks and quiet grace, these birds were seen as earthly manifestations of Thoth, the god of wisdom and writing. Temples housed entire flocks of them, and to harm one was considered sacrilege. Priests would carefully mummify ibises, wrapping them in linen and placing them in elaborate coffins, believing these creatures carried prayers straight to the divine. Archaeologists have uncovered vast underground catacombs filled with thousands of ibis mummies, testament to how deeply these birds were woven into Egypt's spiritual fabric. It's a striking contrast to the parrot's role in India, one bird celebrated for its worldly allure, the other revered as a sacred scribe of the gods. Yet nowhere was the bond between birds and power more vividly displayed than in Mesopotamia and medieval Europe, where falcons soared as symbols of royalty itself. Picture a Mesopotamian king, his gloved arm outstretched as a trained falcon took flight, its razor-sharp eyes locking onto prey, a display of control over nature that mirrored a ruler's dominance over his kingdom. Falcons weren't just hunting companions, they were emblems of precision, speed, and unshakable authority. Centuries later, European nobility would adopt this same imagery, with falconry becoming the sport of kings. The Bayeux Tapestry even depicts Harold Godwinson, the last Anglo-Saxon king of England, holding a falcon, a silent proclamation of his right to rule. But birds didn't just signify status or divinity, they also breathed life into ancient homes with their songs and colors. Roman villas often housed caged nightingales or finches, their melodies filling gardens and courtyards with music. Wealthy families might even commission intricate mosaics of these birds, freezing their beauty in stone. And then there were the omens, a lone owl hooting at dusk, an eagle circling a battlefield. These moments were scrutinized for messages from the gods. When a raven landed on the Forum in Rome, it wasn't just a bird, it was a potential portent, a feathered messenger straddling the line between the mundane and the mystical. What's remarkable is how these ancient connections still resonate. Today, we might not consult ibises for wisdom or train falcons to assert power, but we still fill our homes with canaries' songs or marvel at parrots' mimicry. That urge to bring birds into our lives, to find meaning in their flight, their voices, their wildness is a thread stretching back thousands of years. Whether as symbols of the divine, markers of status, or simply companions that make our world more vibrant, birds have always been more than background creatures. They've been witnesses to history, their wings brushing against the ceilings of palaces, temples, and humble homes alike. Long before modern zoos or safari parks, the ancient world's elite turned their homes into private menageries, where the rarest creatures became living symbols of power and prestige. Picture a lavish banquet in imperial Rome, where guests reclined on couches as a cheetah, its sleek coat glinting in the torchlight paced gracefully among them, a silent testament to the host's wealth and far-reaching influence. These weren't just pets, they were carefully curated marvels, each one a whispered declaration. I command the farthest corners of the earth. Take the Minoans of Crete, whose frescoes reveal an unexpected fascination with monkeys. These playful, nimble creatures, native to distant Africa or Asia, appear in vivid detail on palace walls, their curled tails and expressive faces frozen in mid-leap. Historians believe they were kept as entertainers, their antics delighting nobles who saw them as living proof of Crete's vast trade networks. But their presence hints at something deeper, an ancient human urge to bridge the gap between the familiar and the exotic, to tame the wild and make it part of daily life. Egypt's pharaohs took this idea even further, transforming exotic animals into tools of diplomacy. When Ramses II sought to impress a foreign ruler, he didn't just send gold or jewels, he gifted elephants, lions, or even a giraffe, creatures so astonishing they could soften the hardest of political tensions. Imagine the scene: a Babylonian envoy stunned silence as a towering giraffe, its neck swaying like a palm in the wind, was led into the court. These animals weren't merely gifts, they were strategic masterstrokes, their sheer rarity speaking louder than any treaty. Yet nowhere was the spectacle of exotic pets more flamboyant than in Rome. The wealthy competed to outdo one another, parading leopards on jeweled leashes or training parrots to recite poetry in Greek. Emperor Elagabalus, infamous for his extravagance, once hosted a dinner where live lions, their claws carefully sheathed, lounged beside terrified guests. But beneath the theatrics lay a raw truth. Controlling such creatures was the ultimate flex of imperial dominance. A man who could command a lion, the logic went, could surely command men. What's fascinating is how these ancient practices echo today. When celebrities pose with rare breeds or influencers showcase exotic pets, they're tapping into the same primal desire to stand apart, to wield nature's marvels as extensions of their identity. The difference: for the ancients, these animals weren't just status symbols, they were bridges to a world beyond human grasp, reminders that even the mightiest rulers were mere guests in a vast, untamed universe. In the world of ancient Greece, animals weren't just companions, they were messengers, omens, and even extensions of the gods themselves. Take Athena's owl, its wide, knowing eyes staring out from coins and temple reliefs. This wasn't just a bird, it was the embodiment of wisdom, a creature so sacred that spotting one before battle could fill an army with unshakable confidence. And then there was Zeus's eagle, soaring high above mortals, lightning clutched in its talons, a living symbol of divine power. But these animals weren't confined to myths alone. They perched on the edges of everyday life, blurring the line between the ordinary and the celestial. Walk through an Athenian neighborhood, and you'd hear the sharp bark of a loyal hound guarding its master's doorway. These dogs weren't pampered pets in the modern sense, they were working animals, bred for hunting boar or tracking game through rugged hills, yet their loyalty earned them a place in hearth and home. Xenophon, the famed philosopher and soldier, even wrote an entire treatise on dog breeding, praising their intelligence and courage. And then there were the songbirds. Imagine a quiet courtyard at dusk where the trill of a nightingale filled the air, a sound so cherished that poets compared it to the voices of muses. Wealthy Greeks kept these birds in delicate cages, their melodies transforming homes into private concert halls. Horses occupied a different kind of space in Greek society. Rarely found inside homes, they were the prized possessions of the elite, symbols of status and speed. A well-bred stallion could make a man's reputation, literally. The historian Herodotus tells of a nobleman who won a princess's hand simply by outriding his competitors, and who could forget Bucephalus, Alexander the Great's legendary horse. Their bond was so profound that when the animal died, Alexander founded a city in its honor. But even these majestic creatures paled beside the reverence Greeks held for snakes. Slithering through temples and sacred groves, they were seen as incarnations of Asclepius, the god of healing. Pilgrims seeking cures would sleep in his sanctuaries, trusting that a serpent's flickering tongue might carry whispers of remedy from the divine. What's fascinating is how these beliefs trickled down into the smallest details of daily life. A merchant might release a sparrow as an offering before a voyage, believing its flight path could predict safe passage. A mother might whisper a prayer to Artemis, protector of wild creatures, when her child brought home an injured hare. Even the humblest creatures, cicadas, bees, tortoises, found their way into fables and art, each carrying layers of meaning. Aesop's tales gave them voices, turning them into clever teachers of morality, while pottery painters captured their forms with startling realism. This intertwining of myth and reality reveals something profound about the Greek world. Animals weren't just part of the landscape. They were threads in a grander tapestry, connecting the mundane to the mystical, the home to the heavens. When a Greek nobleman fed scraps to his hound or a priestess tended a temple snake, they weren't just caring for animals, they were honoring a bond that stretched all the way to Olympus itself. And perhaps that's why their stories still resonate today. When we admire an owl's silent flight or feel a dog's unwavering loyalty, we're touching the same timeless wonder that once moved an entire civilization. In the quiet courtyards of ancient Chinese homes, the air hummed with a music modern ears might miss, the rhythmic chirping of crickets carefully kept in delicate bamboo cages. These tiny musicians weren't just background noise, they were living emblems of harmony, their songs believed to balance the energy of a household. Wealthy families would even stage cricket singing competitions, judging the insects' tones like connoisseurs appraising fine poetry. Meanwhile, songbirds like nightingales and larks filled gardens with melodies so prized, their care became an art form. Specialized bird keepers trained them to mimic classical tunes, and the most gifted singers could fetch prices rivaling precious jewels. It wasn't just about beauty, these creatures were thought to channel the voices of ancestors, their songs bridging the mortal world and the divine. Dogs, with their unwavering loyalty, stood guard at gates and granaries, their presence a practical necessity in a world where thieves and wild animals lurked beyond village walls. But their role went deeper than security. Folk tales celebrated dogs as protectors of children, and some breeds, like the sturdy Chow Chow, were believed to ward off evil spirits with their lion-like manes. Yet cats arrived later on the scene, their popularity rising alongside China's bustling trade routes. By the Tang dynasty, sleek felines had become indispensable for keeping silk warehouses free of rodents, a task so vital that harming a cat was sometimes punished as severely as sabotaging the empire's precious silk trade. Then there were the Pekingees, those regal little lions of the lap, bred exclusively for royalty. With their flattened faces and flowing coats, they were more than pets, they were living symbols of imperial refinement. Legend claimed they were miniature dragons, shrunk by the gods to serve as companions to emperors. Court ladies would carry them in wide sleeves, their warm bodies acting as living hand warmers, while poets penned verses comparing their graceful movements to clouds drifting across a summer sky. Even their barks were said to mimic the cadence of ancient chants, a whisper of celestial harmony in earthly form. No discussion of Chinese households would be complete without silkworms, those unassuming caterpillars that shaped empires. Though not pets in the traditional sense, they were cherished residents, their care a meticulous ritual passed down through generations. Women and children would tend to them like nursery maids, feeding them fresh mulberry leaves and whispering prayers for robust cocoons. The silkworm's life cycle, from humble larva to shimmering thread, mirrored Confucian ideals of transformation and renewal, making them spiritual kin as much as economic assets. And hovering over it all were the dragons. Unlike the fire-breathing beasts of Western lore, Chinese dragons were benevolent guardians, their serpentine forms carved into roof beams and painted on doors to shield homes from misfortune. They danced in festival parades, their cloth and paper bodies animated by joyful crowds, and appeared in children's stories as wise, rain-bringing protectors. This blend of the everyday and the mystical crickets singing beside imperial Pekingees, silkworms spinning alongside dragon motifs, reveals a culture that saw no divide between the practical and the sacred. To care for an animal, whether for its song, its labor, or its symbolism, was to weave another thread into the vast, vibrant tapestry of life itself. Mesopotamia's sun-baked plains didn't just give rise to the world's first cities and writing systems. They were also the stage for a revolution that would shape human history forever: the domestication of animals. Picture a shepherd guiding his flock along the Euphrates River, his dog trotting faithfully beside him. This wasn't just a scene of survival, it was the birth of a partnership that would echo across millennia. Sheep and goats, their wool and milk sustaining entire communities, were among the first to transition from wild prey to trusted resources. Cattle, with their immense strength, pulled plows through fertile soil, turning agriculture into the engine of civilization. But it was the dog that carved out a unique place in Mesopotamian homes, becoming more than just a worker. It was a companion, a guardian, and even a spiritual guide. Cuneiform tablets, those ancient clay pages etched with wedge-shaped script, offer glimpses into daily life where animals were central. One tablet from the city of describes a household's grief over a missing dog, pleading to the gods for its safe return. Another lists rations of barley and beer given to temple dogs, their care considered a sacred duty. Artifacts tell the same story: terracotta figurines of dogs curled at their owners' feet, or cylinder seals depicting hunts where hounds and humans move as one. These weren't just decorations, they were testaments to a bond so profound it transcended utility. Then there's the Epic of Gilgamesh, humanity's oldest surviving tale, where a dog stands at the threshold of the divine. After Enkidu's death, Gilgamesh's grief is so immense that the gods send him a nameless hound, a silent companion for his journey through the underworld. This dog isn't just a plot device, it's a bridge between the mortal and the mystical, a reminder that even in our oldest stories, animals walk beside us as equals. What's striking is how these early roles foreshadow the relationships we still have today. The Mesopotamian sheepdog, bred for vigilance, finds its echo in the border collies herding livestock on modern farms. The guardian mastiffs of Babylonian estates share DNA with the protective breeds that now doze on our couches. Even the way we mourn lost pets, etching their names into clay or posting tributes online, reveals an unbroken thread of love stretching back to those first riverbank settlements. But Mesopotamia's legacy isn't just about dogs. Consider the doves released from ziggurats during rituals, their wings carrying prayers to the heavens. Or the lions, symbols of royal power, paraded through city gates to awe the masses. Every creature, from the humblest donkey to the mightiest beast, held a purpose and a personality. A tablet from Nineveh even complains of a mischievous goat devouring a scribe's precious documents, a moment of frustration that any pet owner today would recognize. This wasn't just domestication, it was the beginning of a dialogue between species. When a Babylonian child scratched a puppy's ears or a farmer trusted his oxen to till the land, they were participating in a silent pact, one that recognized animals not just as tools, but as partners in the grand experiment of civilization. And in that recognition, buried beneath layers of time, lies a truth we're still unraveling, that the story of humanity is, in many ways, the story of the creatures who chose to walk beside us. In the shaded courtyards of ancient Indian homes, cows weren't just livestock, they were family. Imagine waking to the sound of hooves gently tapping against packed earth, a patient bovine standing by the doorstep at dawn, her warm breath mingling with the morning mist. To harm her was unthinkable. She was Gaia, the earth mother in living form, her milk nourishing children, her dung plastering walls, her very presence a blessing. This reverence wasn't mere superstition. It was woven into the fabric of Dharma, the cosmic order, where every creature had a sacred role. Even today, you'll find brass bells tied around their necks in rural villages, their chimes a reminder that divinity walks on four legs. But cows weren't the only creatures sharing these homes. Step inside, and you might hear a burst of laughter not from a child, but from a parrot perched on a wooden swing, expertly mimicking its owner's voice. These vibrant birds with emerald feathers and clever eyes were the talk of the household. Kings and merchants competed to own the most eloquent ones, their ability to recite Sanskrit verses or greet guests making them living treasures. Mynas, too, filled rooms with their chatter, their dark feathers glinting like polished ink. To train one was to converse with nature itself, a playful reminder that language wasn't solely a human gift. Then there were the peacocks, their iridescent tails fanning across palace gardens like celestial paintings. More than just symbols of beauty, they were messengers of the monsoon, their piercing cries heralding life-giving rains. Hindu mythology linked them to Saraswati, goddess of wisdom, and Kartikeya, the warrior god who rode a peacock into battle. Even their feathers held power. Artisans wove them into ceremonial fans, believing their shimmer could ward off evil. The spiritual bond between Indians and animals wasn't just about reverence, it was about storytelling. The Panchatantra, written over 2,000 years ago, spun tales where cunning jackals outwitted lions and loyal tortoises saved drowning friends. These weren't just children's fables, they were manuals for living, teaching diplomacy, courage, and caution through the lives of creatures. Aesop might have borrowed their wisdom centuries later, but in India, these stories were sacred, recited under banyan trees as elders passed down timeless truths. What's remarkable is how these beliefs shaped daily life. A dog barking at the moon wasn't just noisy, it might be sensing restless spirits. A cobra slithering through the garden wasn't chased away but offered milk, a nod to its role as a guardian of hidden treasures. Even rats, often reviled elsewhere, found sanctuary in temples like Kani Mata, where they were fed sweets and believed to house the souls of departed devotees. This wasn't mere symbolism, it was a philosophy that blurred boundaries between species. The Upanishads spoke of all life as interconnected, a web where the breath of a cow and the song of a parrot were threads of the same cosmic tapestry. When a merchant released caged birds on his birthday, or a farmer left grain for wild antelope, they weren't just performing rituals, they were honoring a covenant with nature, one that recognized animals not as possessions but as kin. Perhaps that's why, even now, the echo of these ancient bonds lingers. Watch a modern Indian family coax a parrot to speak, or see the reverence in a child's eyes as she feeds a street dog, and you're witnessing a tradition unbroken for millennia. The animals might wear collars instead of bells today, but the truth remains. In India, the line between pet and sacred being was never drawn in the sand, it was washed away by rivers of shared history. The sleek Tessem hound, with its pricked ears and whip-like tail, wasn't just another pet in ancient Egypt, it was a hunter's shadow, moving silently through reed beds along the Nile, its golden eyes locked onto prey. These dogs, ancestors of today's Basenjis, were so valued that pharaohs like Tutankhamun were buried with statues of them, frozen mid-stride as if ready to leap into eternity. But their role wasn't limited to the chase. Scrolls from the New Kingdom depict Tessem hounds curled beneath chairs at banquets, their alert presence a blend of guardian and companion. One particularly touching tomb painting shows a noblewoman offering a morsel to her dog, its tail wagging in eternal pigment, proof that the joy of sharing a meal with a loyal friend transcends time. Yet Egypt's fascination with animals stretched far beyond dogs and cats. Imagine a sun-dappled courtyard where a mischievous baboon, its fur the color of desert sand, entertains children by mimicking their gestures. These primates imported from Nubia were prized for their intelligence and antics, their presence a status symbol among the elite, but they also held a darker allure. Priests observed baboons raising their arms to the sunrise, interpreting it as worship, leading to their association with Thoth, the god of wisdom. Some temples even kept sacred baboons, their movements scrutinized for divine messages. It's a striking paradox. Creatures that delighted households by day became conduits to the gods by night. Then there were the gazelles, their delicate hooves padding across palace gardens. Tamed for their grace rather than utility, they were living ornaments, their slender necks adorned with jeweled collars. But even these gentle creatures carried symbolic weight. The goddess Anukit, patron of the Nile's cataracts, was often depicted as a gazelle, linking these pets to the life-giving waters that sustained Egypt. A fresco from Amarna shows Queen Nefertiti stroking a gazelle's head, the animal's trusting posture mirroring the harmony between humanity and nature that Egyptians revered. No creature embodied the spiritual duality of Egyptian pets more than the jackal. Wild packs might prowl the desert's edge, but in homes and temples, their domesticated kin were honored as earthly representatives of Anubis. This god of the dead, with his sleek black jackal head, wasn't a figure of fear but a compassionate guide. His role was to weigh hearts against the feather of truth, ensuring safe passage to the afterlife. Families who kept jackals as pets weren't just seeking novelty, they were inviting the divine into their daily lives. A burial stela from Saqqara shows a man with his pet jackal seated beside him, the inscription reading, "May Anubis recognize his own." This blending of the practical and the sacred reached its peak in the afterlife preparations for pets. While cats were mummified with meticulous care, other animals received similar honors. Excavations have revealed dog cemeteries where each burial includes toys or treats, a chew stick placed between jaws, a leather ball tucked beside paws. Monkeys were sometimes buried in fetal positions, wrapped in linen dyed with henna, as if returning them to the womb of the earth. Even ibises, though not typical pets, were preserved by the millions, their curved beaks pointing toward the realm of Thoth. What's extraordinary is how these ancient practices mirror modern grief. When we engrave a pet's name on a collar tag or save a lock of fur, we're participating in a ritual as old as the pyramids. The Egyptians understood something profound. An animal's value isn't measured by its utility alone. Whether hunting alongside a Tessem hound, laughing at a baboon's antics, or seeking comfort in a gazelle's quiet presence, they recognized that pets stitch themselves into the fabric of our lives, threads connecting the mundane to the eternal. And in that recognition, they left us a legacy far more enduring than gold or stone. The certainty that love for a creature, whether god or companion, is never small. Walk into the atrium of a wealthy Roman villa, and your feet might pause over a mosaic so vivid it feels alive. A black and white dog frozen mid-bark, its teeth bared in warning beneath the words Cave Canem. This wasn't just a decorative flourish, it was a snapshot of daily life, a testament to how deeply animals were woven into the rhythm of Roman homes. The dog in this mosaic isn't some mythical beast or symbolic abstraction, it's a real creature, its collar studded with bronze, its paws planted firmly as if ready to spring. Archaeologists believe these "beware of the dog" mosaics were as functional as they were artistic, serving as both a deterrent to intruders and a proud display of the household's loyal protector. But step further inside, and the mosaics reveal a softer side of pet ownership. In the triclinium, where guests reclined for feasts, playful scenes unfold beneath their couches. Tiny Melodian dogs, ancestors of today's Maltese, chasing each other's tails or gnawing on discarded bones. One particularly charming mosaic from Pompeii shows a pup playfully tugging at the hem of a child's tunic, their bond captured in colored stone for eternity. These weren't generic animals, they were individuals, their quirks and personalities immortalized by artisans who clearly observed them with affection. Notice the careful details: the floppy ear of one dog, the speckled coat of another, proof that these weren't just stock images, but portraits of beloved companions. Birds flit through these mosaics too, their wings forever outstretched in mid-flight. In the House of the Faun, a magnificent peacock struts across the floor, its iridescent tail rendered in shades of blue and gold glass paste. Elsewhere, delicate songbirds perch on the rims of marble fountains, their presence a reminder that Romans didn't just keep birds for their melodies, they celebrated their beauty as living art. Even fish had their place. Elaborate mosaics of marine life adorned the floors of private baths, where colorful specimens darted through tessellated waves. Some wealthy Romans even kept fish in ornamental ponds, their shimmering scales a status symbol as dazzling as any jewel. What's striking is how these mosaics mirror modern pet culture. When we post photos of our dogs or commission portraits of our cats, we're participating in a tradition as old as Rome itself. The medium has changed from stone tiles to smartphone screens, but the impulse remains the same: to freeze a fleeting moment of joy, to say, "This creature mattered." The mosaics also reveal a hierarchy of pets. Guard dogs earned pride of place at the entrance, lap dogs lounged in intimate family spaces, and exotic birds dazzled in public areas, each animal's role reflected in its artistic treatment. Perhaps the most poignant examples are the memorial mosaics. In Ostia, a seaport near Rome, a mosaic depicts a curly-haired dog named Issa, her name inscribed beside her like a tombstone. She's shown with a favorite toy clutched in her mouth, a detail so tender it bridges the centuries. Another, from a villa in Sicily, shows an old hunting hound lying peacefully, his muzzle gone gray, a tribute to years of loyal service. These weren't just decorations, they were love letters in stone, a way to ensure that even in death, a pet's presence endured. So the next time you trip over your dog's toy or pause to listen to your parrot's chatter, remember, 2,000 years ago, someone in a Roman villa might have glanced at their own pet and thought, "This moment is worth preserving." Whether as guardians, entertainers, or simply silent witnesses to human lives, animals have always been more than just background characters. They've been family, and thanks to these mosaics we can still meet them, one tessera at a time. Long before modern medicine understood the science behind pet therapy, ancient civilizations had already unlocked the healing power of animals, not just in body but in spirit. In the shadowed halls of Egyptian temples, cats weren't merely prowling for mice. They were believed to absorb illness and negative energy, their purring vibrations thought to mend broken bones and soothe fevered brows. Priests would place ailing worshippers near sleeping temple cats, convinced the creatures could draw out sickness like invisible poison, and it wasn't just folklore. Recent studies suggest the low-frequency hum of a cat's purr may actually promote tissue regeneration, a proof that ancient intuition sometimes aligns with modern science in the most extraordinary ways. Meanwhile, along the banks of the Nile, another unlikely healer slithered through the reeds, the cobra. Though feared for its deadly bite, its venom was carefully harvested by skilled physicians, diluted into potions to treat everything from joint pain to heart conditions. The logic was startlingly precise, using the cause of harm to create its cure, a principle that foreshadowed today's vaccines. Even the ibis with its slender beak played a role. Surgeons mimicked its shape when crafting bronze surgical tools, believing the bird's association with Thoth, god of wisdom, would guide their hands. Travel north to Greece, and you'd find the Asclepians' healing sanctuaries where non-venomous snakes coiled around staffs and slithered freely among patients. These weren't pests, they were living embodiments of Asclepius, their flickering tongues, diagnosing illness by sensing changes in body heat. Visitors would sleep in the abaton, a sacred dormitory, trusting that the snake's nocturnal inspections might bring divine dreams of cures. And sometimes it worked, placebo effect or not. Inscriptions on temple walls tell of paralyzed men walking and blind women seeing after encounters with these serpentine healers. The Romans took a more practical approach, breeding a special lineage of temple dogs known as medicinae canes. These large, gentle molosses were trained to lick wounds clean, their saliva believed to have antiseptic properties. Legionnaires returning from battle would seek out these canines, their warm tongues tending injuries with a care no human hand could match. But the dog's true magic lay in their intuition. Ancient texts describe them nuzzling patients' abdomens where tumors later were found, an eerie precursor to modern cancer-sniffing dogs. Even Pliny the Elder wrote of a noblewoman's terrier that detected her breast cancer by persistently pawing at one spot, a story that wouldn't seem out of place in a medical journal today. Insects, too, buzzed through the apothecaries of antiquity. Greek physicians prized honeybees not just for their golden syrup, which sealed wounds and fought infection, but for their venom. Apitherapy, using bee stings to reduce inflammation, was practiced as early as Hippocrates' time. And in China, silkworm larvae were ground into powders to lower fevers, while cricket extracts treated kidney ailments. These remedies might sound bizarre now, but consider this. Penicillin came from mold, and cobra venom birthed blood pressure medications. The ancients were onto something we're still unraveling. What ties these practices together is a profound truth we're only now rediscovering. Healing isn't just about chemicals or scalpels, it's about connection. When a Roman soldier buried his face in his dog's fur after battle, or an Egyptian child clutched a purring cat during illness, they were tapping into a primal comfort no pharmacy can replicate. Modern hospitals now bring in therapy dogs, and studies confirm pet owners heal faster, proof that our ancestors weren't just spinning myths. They understood, in their way, that sometimes the best medicine has 4 legs, wings, or scales, and looks back at us with eyes full of silent wisdom. In the rolling plains of Persia, a nobleman's wealth wasn't measured solely in gold or land. It was counted in the sleek, muscular forms of Arabian horses thundering across the landscape. These weren't just mounts, they were extensions of their riders' souls, bred for speed and endurance so extraordinary that legends claimed they could outrun the wind. Persian aristocracy took such pride in their steeds that they adorned them with bridles of woven gold and caparisons embroidered with celestial motifs, transforming every ride into a spectacle of power. The Greek historian Xenophon, awestruck by Persian horsemanship, wrote that their cavalry moved as one creature, horse and rider fused by years of meticulous training. But this bond went deeper than warfare or sport. A Persian proverb held that a man without a fine horse was a bird without wings, grounded, incomplete. Meanwhile, in the imperial courts of China, horses galloped straight into the realm of the divine. Emperor Wu of Han sent expeditions thousands of miles westward to Fergana, risking lives and treasure, all to secure a handful of heavenly horses, a tall, long-legged steeds said to sweat blood, their veins standing out like rivers on a map. These creatures weren't merely transportation. They were living omens, their arrival heralding heaven's favor. Artists immortalized them in bronze sculptures, their hooves forever suspended mid-gallop, while poets likened their flowing manes to clouds chasing the moon. The Tang dynasty elevated this reverence further, painting horses with such vibrant detail that their flanks seemed to ripple beneath the silk scrolls. A single glance at these artworks reveals the truth. In China, a horse was never just an animal. It was a brushstroke of cosmic energy, a vessel for imperial ambition. Greek mythology blurred the lines between horse and hero entirely. Take Bellerophon, the mortal who tamed Pegasus not through force, but with a golden bridle gifted by Athena. Their airborne battles against the monstrous chimera weren't just thrilling tales. They symbolized humanity's yearning to rise above earthly limits. Even in daily life, horses occupied a sacred space. The Parthenon's frieze shows Athenian youth astride spirited steeds during the Panathenaic procession, their partnership a microcosm of harmony between civilization and nature. And when Alexander the Great buried his beloved Bucephalus, he didn't just inter a horse, he founded a city in its honor, ensuring its name would echo through history. Archaeology whispers secrets of this bond in the quietest way. From the frozen tombs of Scythian chieftains to the sun-baked burial mounds of Egypt, horses have been found lying beside their owners, their bones still bearing the marks of ornate tack. In Mongolia, a grave dating back 3,000 years reveals a mare and foal carefully arranged as if asleep, their legs folded beneath them, a poignant farewell to companions who'd carried their riders beyond the horizon one last time. These weren't mere sacrifices, they were passages ensuring the journey continued even in death. What's astonishing is how these ancient relationships still gallop through our collective imagination. The phrase "dark horse" in politics, the enduring allure of equestrian sports, even children's fascination with unicorns, all are hoofbeats from a past where horses weren't just tools, but partners in shaping the human story. When you see a rider and horse moving as one today, you're witnessing a dance choreographed over millennia, its steps perfected in Persian arenas, Chinese stables, and Greek myths. And perhaps that's why their power still takes our breath away, because they carry not just riders, but the weight of history itself. The walls of an Egyptian tomb tell a silent story, not in hieroglyphs, but in the sinuous form of a cat painted beside its owner's chair, its golden eyes following you across 3,000 years. This wasn't mere decoration, it was a love letter in pigment, ensuring the beloved pet would accompany its human into eternity. Across the ancient world, animals didn't just appear in art, they spoke through it. Greek potters captured the muscular grace of charging bulls, their curved horns framing scenes of heroism, while Minoan frescoes froze leaping dolphins mid-arc, their joy immortalized in plaster. Every stroke carried meaning. A dog at a hunter's side symbolized fidelity, an owl perched on Athena's shoulder whispered wisdom, and a coiled serpent hinted at rebirth. Take Pompeii's famous parrot fresco, where a vibrant green bird, likely an Indian ringneck, perches on a bronze stand, its feathers rendered in such dazzling detail that you can almost hear it squawk. This wasn't just a wealthy family showing off an exotic pet. It was a testament to Rome's vast trade networks, where birds from distant continents became living status symbols. The artist even captured the parrot's inquisitive head tilt, a touch so personal it feels like meeting someone's cherished companion across the centuries. In Mesopotamia, cylinder seals told quieter stories. Roll one across wet clay, and you'd see herds of goats tended by alert dogs, their roles as protectors and providers pressed into every administrative tablet. Meanwhile, Chinese Han Dynasty bronzes immortalized horses mid-gallop, their flowing manes and flaring nostrils embodying the Taoist ideal of unrestrained spirit. Even the humblest creatures had their moment. Etruscan artisans shaped oil lamps into grinning hedgehogs, their spiky backs cleverly designed to shield flames from drafts. What's extraordinary is how these artworks blur the line between symbolism and individuality. The mastiff carved into a Celtic chieftain's tomb isn't just a generic guardian. Its distinctive folded ears and scarred muzzle suggest a real dog who once stood watch. A Byzantine mosaic in Ravenna depicts two peacocks drinking from a chalice, their iridescent tails fanning out like stained glass. But look closer. One has a chipped beak, a flaw so specific it must have been modeled from life. These images were more than pretty pictures. They were contracts with the divine, declarations of identity, and sometimes quiet acts of grief. When a Sumerian scribe etched a tiny donkey beside a child's burial tablet, or a Viking carved a loyal hound onto a grave post, they were bridging worlds and ensuring that the creatures who shared their earthly journeys wouldn't be left behind. Today, when we snap photos of our pets or commission their portraits, we're part of that same unbroken chain. The mediums change, but the message remains: you mattered. You still do. The story of how animals moved from the edges of human survival to the center of our hearts is written in small, tender details like the worn leather collar found in a Roman villa, its bronze tag inscribed with a plea: "If lost, return me to Lucius in the Subura." This wasn't just a tool for identification. It was a testament to love, a whisper across centuries that says, this creature was irreplaceable. Early relationships between humans and animals were undeniably practical. Dogs tracked game through dense forests, cats guarded granaries from ravenous rodents, and falcons brought down prey to fill cooking pots. But somewhere along the way, something extraordinary happened. A farmer paused to scratch his hound's ears after a long hunt. A child shared her bread crust with a stray kitten. These fleeting moments of connection planted seeds that would grow into bonds as unshakable as any between humans. Archaeology offers poignant proof of this shift. In the ruins of the Egyptian city of Abydos, archaeologists uncovered a burial where a woman lay curled around her dog, their skeletons intertwined as if in sleep. Nearby, a pottery bowl held traces of meat provisions for the afterlife. This wasn't a working animal interred out of necessity. This was family. Similarly, Roman epitaphs carved into stone slabs reveal emotions startlingly modern in their depth. One from Pompeii reads, "To my dear little dog, Helena, you who are the sweetest companion, taken too soon." The grief in those words mirrors social media tributes to lost pets today, proving that heartache knows no expiration date. By the Middle Ages, the transformation was undeniable. Illuminated manuscripts show noblewomen cradling tiny lapdogs, their jeweled collars sparkling in the margins. These dogs served no practical purpose. They couldn't hunt boar or guard castles, yet they occupied places of honor on silk pillows and in royal portraits. The Duc de Berry, a 15th century French nobleman, commissioned an entire book of hours featuring his favorite spaniel, its fluffy face peeking from floral borders. Meanwhile, in monasteries, cats curled around ink pots as monks penned manuscripts, their presence tolerated not for pest control, but for the quiet comfort they offered during long hours of labor. What's fascinating is how this evolution mirrors broader societal changes. As humans gained control over their environments, building safer cities, storing surplus food, the need for animals as pure utility lessened. But rather than drifting apart, the bond deepened on emotional terms. Pets became mirrors reflecting our capacity for tenderness, our hunger for connection beyond our own species. A medieval merchant might not have understood the science behind oxytocin or the love hormone, but he knew the warmth in his chest when his terrier greeted him at the door. This shift wasn't linear or universal. In some corners of the world, animals remained primarily tools well into modern times, yet even there, cracks in the purely practical facade appeared. Whaling logs from the 1800s mention ships' cats with names like Salty or Lucky, their antics lifting sailors' spirits during brutal voyages. Cavalry regiments in the Napoleonic Wars buried their horses with full military honors, their loss mourned as keenly as any soldiers. Today, when we fuss over gourmet pet food or throw birthday parties for our guinea pigs, we're standing on the shoulders of millennia of incremental change. That Roman who wept over his dog's grave, the Egyptian who tucked a mummified mouse into a cat's wrappings, they were pioneers of a revolution, not in technology or politics, but in the quiet expansion of empathy. And perhaps that's the most enduring legacy of our journey with animals. Not just that we learned to rely on them, but that they taught us how to love beyond the boundaries of our own kind. In the flickering firelight of a Norse longhouse, storytellers whispered of Jerry and Freki, Odin's twin wolves, who feasted beside the god himself on the choicest cuts of meat while their master drank only wine. These weren't just beasts, they were extensions of divine will, their howls echoing the Allfather's hunger for wisdom. Viking children grew up knowing these tales by heart, but the wolves' symbolism ran deeper than myth. When a real wolf prowled the edge of a settlement, it wasn't merely a predator, it was a living omen, a creature straddling the boundary between this world and the next. Warriors carved wolf heads onto their shields, hoping to channel their ferocity, while shamans wore pelts during rituals, believing the animal spirits could guide them through the veil of the unseen. Cross the sea to Celtic lands, and animals took on even more fluid identities. Druids spoke of Selkie seals who shed their skins to walk as humans, and swan maidens whose feathers concealed divine beauty. A hunting party might glimpse a stag with antlers like gilded branches, only to watch it vanish into mist, leaving them to wonder, was it beast, spirit, or something in between? These stories weren't just entertainment, they reflected a worldview where the lines between species blurred effortlessly. To harm a swan or disrupt a fox's den might mean unknowingly angering a transformed ancestor. Such beliefs shaped daily life. Villagers left offerings of milk for hedgehogs, seeing them as carriers of luck, and farmers avoided cutting down hawthorn trees where fairy horses were said to graze. Nowhere was this duality more striking than in the ever-shifting reputation of black cats. In ancient Egypt, their sleek forms were draped in gold and worshipped as vessels of Bastet's protection. Sailors prized them as shipboard guardians, convinced their presence could ward off storms. Yet by the Middle Ages, that same Inkai fur marked them as familiars of witches in Europe, a superstition so pervasive it led to mass killings of felines, a tragedy some historians link to the unchecked spread of plague-carrying rats. The Japanese took a different view. A black cat crossing your path promised good fortune, especially for single women seeking love. These contradictions reveal less about the animals themselves and more about humanity's endless quest to project meaning onto the natural world. Even creatures we consider mundane today once pulsed with magic. The humble hare, for instance, was no simple herbivore to the ancient Britons. It was a shapeshifter, a lunar symbol, and a forbidden food for warriors who believed consuming its flesh would steal their courage. Meanwhile, in West African traditions, spiders like Anansi wove wisdom into intricate webs, their stories crossing oceans with the enslaved to become foundational folktales in the Caribbean and Americas. What unites these beliefs is their refusal to see animals as mere background characters in human dramas. Whether as guides, omens, or celestial messengers, they were active participants in the grand narrative, threads connecting earth to sky, mortality to eternity. When your cat stares intently at an empty corner today, or a crow lands on your windowsill with uncanny timing, that ancient whisper still lingers. What if they're not just animals, but keepers of secrets we've forgotten how to hear? When an Egyptian pharaoh wished to impress a foreign ruler, he didn't just send gold or jewels, he dispatched a troop of baboons, their expressive faces and nimble hands a living testament to Egypt's reach into distant lands. These primates, carefully transported up the Nile and across deserts, were more than exotic novelties. They were strategic masterstrokes of diplomacy. Imagine the scene in a Babylonian court as the king's advisors gaped at these creatures, so unlike anything in Mesopotamia, their antics breaking the ice in tense negotiations. The message was unmistakable: we command the mysteries of far-off realms. China's imperial courts played this game with equal finesse, but their currency was canine. The tiny, lion-maned Pekingees, so revered they were believed to be miniature dragons, were reserved exclusively for royalty. When one was gifted to a visiting diplomat, it wasn't just a pet. It was a fragment of the emperor's own prestige, a signal of favor no amount of silk could match. Meanwhile, along the Silk Road, Fergana horses became legendary. These heavenly steeds, with their metallic sheen and unmatched stamina, were so coveted that Emperor Wu of Han launched military campaigns just to secure a handful. To gift such a horse was to offer a piece of the sky itself. The Romans turned animal diplomacy into theater. When Augustus wanted to dazzle potential allies, he'd parade Indian tigers through the streets, their stripes igniting whispers of Rome's dominion over the known world. But perhaps the most audacious move came from a lesser-known ruler, King Juba Roman II of Mauritania, who sent a giraffe to Caesar. The creature's arrival in Rome caused a sensation, its neck bending like a sapling in the wind, its spots like brushstrokes from a god's paintbrush. For days, the city's poets struggled for words, finally dubbing it Camelopardolis, the camel leopard, a name that still lingers in science today. What made these exchanges so potent wasn't just the rarity of the animals, but the sheer impracticality of their gifting. A baboon couldn't till fields, a Pekingese couldn't guard flocks, yet their value lay precisely in their uselessness. Only a ruler of boundless wealth and influence could afford to trade in creatures that served no purpose but wonder. And therein lay the genius. These animals weren't just gifts. They were arguments without words, proof that the giver's power stretched beyond necessity into the realm of the extraordinary. The legacy of these transactions still echoes today. When modern leaders exchange rare orchids or championship racehorses, they're participating in a ritual as old as civilization itself. One where the most memorable treaties aren't written on parchment, but carried on 4 legs, wings, or paws. Because in the end, nothing bridges divides like shared awe, and few things inspire awe quite like a creature that seems to have stepped out of a dream. High above the Mesopotamian plains, a falconer's gloved hand remained steady as his bird returned from the hunt, its talons gripping a freshly caught hare. This wasn't luck, it was the result of generations of meticulous training, a partnership between human and raptor refined over centuries. Falconry here wasn't just a sport. It was an art form, with trainers studying each bird's instincts, rewarding obedience with morsels of meat, and patiently teaching them to associate the hunt with the sound of a whistle. These techniques, recorded on cuneiform tablets as early as 2000 BC, reveal an almost scientific understanding of animal behavior. The Assyrians even had specialized terms for different training stages, from mudu, the initial bonding period, to raimu, when the bird finally struck prey on command. What's extraordinary is how little these methods have changed. Modern falconers still use variations of those ancient signals, proving that some bonds transcend time. Meanwhile, along the Nile, Egyptian farmers were pioneering a far quirkier form of animal labor. Tomb paintings show monkeys likely imported from Nubia scaling palm trees to harvest dates, their nimble fingers plucking fruit that human hands couldn't reach. Trainers capitalized on the animals' natural climbing instincts, rewarding them with figs for every successful pick, but the real innovation was in their handling. Unlike falconry, which relied on dominance, the Egyptians used positive reinforcement, shaping behaviors through patience and repetition. Archaeologists have uncovered tiny bronze collars with grapevine motifs, suggesting some monkeys were even promoted to vineyard work as they mastered their tasks. The Persians took a different approach, breeding dogs with surgical precision for specific roles. In the sprawling kennels of Persepolis, mastiffs were raised to guard palaces, their deep barks echoing through marble halls, while slender Salukis were honed for gazelle hunting, their lean bodies built for endurance. Zoroastrian texts describe training regimens that sound strikingly modern: puppies separated into playgroups to build social skills, adult dogs undergoing mock hunts with scented lures. One bas-relief shows a hound mid-leap, its muscles coiled in perfect alignment, while a trainer holds up a curved stick not to strike but to guide the jump's arc. This wasn't brute coercion, it was an early form of clicker training using visual cues to shape behavior. Rome's contribution, standardization. From military camps to sprawling villas, dogs were drilled with uniform commands. Cave meant guard, pet signaled restraint, and huck called them to heel. The poet Gratius even wrote a hunting manual breaking down training into phases, emphasizing consistency and calm authority. Legionnaires stationed across the empire brought these methods to new lands, creating the first ripple of globalized dog training. And it wasn't just canines. Romans trained cormorants to fish, teaching them to dive for prey but drop the catch into waiting baskets, a technique still practiced in parts of China today. What ties these ancient practices together is their underlying philosophy: observation first, force last. Whether teaching a baboon to sort figs by ripeness or a falcon to ignore distractions, successful trainers began by studying the creature's natural rhythms. A Mesopotamian text advises would-be falconers to watch the bird as the moon watches the tides, adjusting techniques to individual temperaments. That same principle now underpins modern animal behaviorism, proving that the deepest wisdom sometimes wears the patina of age. So the next time your dog sits at a verbal cue or your parrot mimics a phrase, remember you're participating in a conversation that began when humans first looked at animals and saw not just tools but partners. Beneath the golden sands of Egypt, archaeologists have uncovered tombs where the line between human and animal blurs into eternity. In one such burial, a noblewoman lies with her greyhound stretched across her feet, its collar still studded with lapis lazuli beads, a silent testament to a bond that even death couldn't sever. This wasn't an isolated act of sentimentality. It was part of a profound belief that pets weren't just companions for this life, but guides for the next. The Egyptians didn't merely bury animals with their owners, they painstakingly mummified them, wrapping their bodies in linen soaked with resins that smelled of myrrh and honey. Some cats were adorned with tiny bronze masks, their faces eternally frozen in serene repose, while ibises were folded into lotus-like positions, their beaks pointing toward the realm of Thoth. These weren't mere rituals, they were love letters written in spices and bandages. Half a world away, Viking longships burned on funeral pyres, their sails billowing with smoke as warriors were sent to Valhalla alongside their steeds. A stallion might be buried upright, its hooves shod in silver for the journey to the afterlife, its mane braided with charms to ward off evil spirits. Norse sagas speak of Odin's eight-legged horse Sleipnir, capable of galloping between worlds, a celestial echo of the earthly horses who carried their riders into battle and now into eternity. At the Oseberg ship burial in Norway, archaeologists found not just weapons and treasures, but the skeletons of 13 horses and 4 dogs, their bones arranged as if mid-stride. The message was clear: in death as in life, these animals were kin. The Romans took a different but equally tender approach. Along the Appian Way, stone epitaphs for pets outnumber those for some human family members. One from the 1st century AD shows a relief of a young girl cradling a tiny dog, the inscription reading, "To my sweet Issa, who was more faithful than any friend." Nearby, a mausoleum for a wealthy merchant contains a niche where his favorite songbird was interred in a gold wire cage, its door left slightly ajar, perhaps so its spirit could still sing for him in the underworld. Even the Celts, often depicted as fierce warriors, buried their hounds with care. In Yorkshire, an Iron Age grave reveals a dog laid on a bed of meadow flowers, its paws folded over a chew toy made of deer antler. What's heartbreakingly universal is the grief etched into these acts. A Sumerian clay tablet from 4,000 years ago laments the death of a man's dog, asking the gods to greet him with a scrap of meat, as I did in life. In Peru, the Moch people buried their hunting dogs with miniature looms, ensuring they'd have work to occupy them in the afterlife. And in Han Dynasty China, aristocrats tucked jade cicadas into the mouths of their deceased pets, symbols of rebirth that whispered, "This isn't goodbye." These practices weren't just about religion or status. They were about the raw, unspoken truth that losing a pet leaves a unique ache. When an Egyptian child slipped a clay mouse into their cat's wrappings, or a Viking warrior clasped his horse's bridle one final time, they were grappling with the same emptiness we feel today. The medium's change. Mummification gives way to urns, burial mounds to framed photos, but the core remains: love that refuses to acknowledge the boundaries of species or mortality. In the end, these ancient graves aren't just archaeological sites. They're mirrors showing us that the tears we shed for our pets today are part of an ancient, unbroken river. The words we use every day to describe our pets carry whispers of ancient voices, proving that language itself has been shaped by our bond with animals. Take the word canine. It rolls off our tongues so effortlessly, yet its roots stretch all the way back to the Latin canis, a term Roman children might have shouted while playing with their dogs in marble courtyards. Similarly, feline owes its elegance to felis, the Latin name for cats who once prowled Egyptian temples. These aren't just dry linguistic artifacts. They're living proof that our ancestors needed words to capture the essence of creatures who shared their homes and hearts. Even the simple act of calling a dog puppy connects us to the old French poupier, meaning doll or toy, a nod to how medieval Europeans doted on their tiny lapdogs like precious playthings. Mythology left even deeper marks on our vocabulary. The name Cerberus Hades' three-headed hound still sends shivers down spines today, repurposed in everything from heavy metal bands to sci-fi monsters. But lesser-known names linger too. The Norse wolf Fenrir lives on in Scandinavian words for storm and chaos, while the Egyptian jackal god Anubis quietly prowls through terms like canopy, derived from the Greek konops, meaning mosquito net, a nod to the protective, shrouding role Anubis played in death rituals. Even our modern aviary owes its existence to the Latin avis, a word that once described the songbirds wealthy Romans kept in gilded cages. What's fascinating is how these words evolved beyond their original contexts. Tabby, now synonymous with striped cats, actually comes from Atabia, a Baghdad neighborhood famed for its silk fabric whose wavy patterns resembled a cat's fur. Sailors brought the term home, and over centuries it shed its exotic origins to become a household word. Similarly, parrot traces back to the French parrot, a diminutive of Pierre, reflecting how medieval Europeans humanized their chatty birds. These linguistic journeys reveal more than etymology. They show us how pets blurred the lines between the foreign and the familiar, the wild and the domestic. The animal kingdom even shaped our grammar. The Latin murmur originally imitated the sound of buzzing bees, while twitter emerged from Old English to capture the staccato chatter of sparrows. Ancient onomatopoeia became the building blocks of language itself, proving that our ancestors didn't just name animals, they listened to them, learning to translate barks, purrs, and chirps into human speech. So the next time you call your dog or scold your cat, remember, you're not just speaking, you're channeling millennia of shared history, your words carrying the weight of pyramids, Viking longships, and Roman villas. Every good boy, and here, Kitty, is a tiny monument to the creatures who, in shaping our lives, also shaped the very way we express our love for them. In ancient Greece, the trill of a nightingale in a gilded cage often signaled a woman's domain, while the baying of hounds in the courtyard marked the pursuits of men. This division wasn't arbitrary, it mirrored the rigid gender roles that shaped daily life. Women, expected to cultivate beauty and harmony within the home, favored songbirds like larks and finches, their melodies weaving through the loom's rhythm as they spun wool. Men, meanwhile, bonded over hunting dogs, agile Laconians or powerful Molossians, their partnerships forged in the chase, a reflection of valor and physical prowess. Even in art, the contrast is striking. Red figure vases show men striding with leashed hounds, while terracotta figurines depict women offering seeds to perched birds. But history, as always, refuses to be tidy. Step into the sun-drenched halls of Egypt's new kingdom, and you'll find Queen Hatshepsut, a pharaoh who wielded power with the ferocity of the lions she kept in her palace. These big cats weren't mere status symbols. They were extensions of her authority, living embodiments of the goddess Sekhmet's untamed might. Similarly, in Rome, elite women like Livia Drusilla defied expectations by breeding prized Molossian guard dogs, their kennels rivaling those of military generals. And let's not forget the Celtic warrior Queen Boudica, whose war chariot was said to be flanked by massive hounds, their snarls as fearsome as her battle cries. The divide between masculine and feminine pets also blurred in unexpected corners of daily life. Greek courtesans, for instance, kept sleek greyhounds, a breed associated with speed and aristocracy, as both companions and clever conversation starters during symposia. Meanwhile, Roman boys learning rhetoric often practiced speeches to an audience of pet pigeons, their coups a forgiving alternative to the stern critiques of tutors. Even in conservative Sparta, where masculinity was policed with relentless rigor, boys were given puppies to raise, teaching them nurturing skills alongside combat drills. These contradictions reveal a deeper truth. While societal norms might dictate who should own which animals, the heart rarely follows rules. A cuneiform tablet from Mesopotamia tells of a merchant's daughter who secretly trained her father's falcon, dazzling the court with its aerial tricks. In China's Tang dynasty, poems by female scholars overflow with tender references to their sleeve dogs, a tiny pekingese carried like living jewels, their warmth a private comfort in a world of public restraint. What's striking is how these ancient patterns echo today. The stereotype of cats as feminine and dogs as masculine still lingers, yet anyone who's seen a burly biker coo over a rescue kitten or a CEO's wife command a pack of Rottweilers knows better. The past whispers to us that pets have always been more than accessories to gender. They're mirrors of individuality, defiance, and sometimes quiet rebellion. Whether a Greek girl hiding a sparrow in her tunic or a pharaoh's daughter walking a leopard on a leash, the real story isn't about roles. It's about the unscripted moments when a creature's gaze or nuzzle made all the world's divisions feel wonderfully irrelevant. In the sunlit courtyards of ancient Athens, a boy's first responsibility wasn't chores or studies, it was the care of a scrappy little dog, its tail wagging as it trailed him through olive groves. Greek philosophers like Aristotle saw animals as living textbooks, their needs teaching children patience and their affection nurturing empathy. A scratched-together toy of knucklebones might entertain for an afternoon, but the steady rhythm of feeding a goat or brushing a horse's mane instilled something deeper, the understanding that another life depended on their attention. Even the youngest children participated, gathering fallen fruit for pet tortoises or filling clay bowls with water for songbirds. These weren't just tasks, they were the building blocks of character, woven seamlessly into daily life. Egypt took this concept further, blending play with purpose. Archaeologists have unearthed dozens of wooden cat toys, their limbs articulated to mimic pouncing, their surfaces worn smooth by small hands. Some even had strings attached, suggesting children led them around like early pull-along toys. But these figurines weren't just playthings. They were miniature versions of the sacred felines that prowled every level of Egyptian society. When a child cradled a toy cat, they weren't just imagining, they were practicing reverence. Tomb paintings show girls offering fish to real cats while holding their wooden counterparts, a beautiful symmetry between play and ritual. The emotional impact of these bonds lingers in unexpected places. In Pompeii, the plaster cast of a young child's body cradles the skeleton of a small dog, their forms fused forever by volcanic ash. Nearby, a crude charcoal sketch on a wall depicts a boy scratching his pet behind the ears, the lines shaky but bursting with affection. Even in Rome, where discipline was strict, letters survive from fathers stationed abroad promising to bring home a puppy with floppy ears for their children. One particularly touching graffito in Austria shows a child's handprint beside a paw print, pressed into wet clay as if to say, "We were here together." What's remarkable is how little the core of these relationships has changed. Modern parents still gift Tamagotchis to teach responsibility or adopt guinea pigs to nurture compassion. The mediums shift, wooden cats become plush toys, courtyard goats become goldfish in bowls, but the underlying truth remains. Caring for something smaller than yourself is humanity's oldest lesson in kindness. Perhaps that's why archaeologists find so many tiny collars and miniature feeding dishes in ancient homes. They weren't just preparing children for adulthood. They were teaching them how to love. The gleaming menageries of ancient royalty often hid a darker truth behind the spectacle of parading leopards on golden leashes or monkeys dancing in jeweled collars lay untold suffering. Roman mosaics may celebrate exotic pets as symbols of power, but scrolls from the same era tell another story. Elephants dying of foot infections from cold marble floors, giraffes wasting away without their native foliage, and parrots plucked from jungles only to perish in drafty villas. One particularly heartbreaking account describes Emperor Elagabalus staging a banquet where hundreds of rare birds were released indoors, only to collapse from smoke inhalation as dishes were flambéed, a display of extravagance that prioritized shock value over compassion. Yet even in societies that treated animals as commodities, voices of dissent emerged. The philosopher Plutarch penned entire essays condemning the Roman appetite for exotic pets, arguing that to deprive a creature of its natural life for our amusement is to corrupt our own humanity. In India, Emperor Ashoka's edicts from the 3rd century BC, carved into stone pillars, mandated veterinary care for all animals and banned the capture of forest creatures for royal entertainment. And in Egypt, where cats were mummified by the millions, forensic evidence reveals a grimmer reality. Many were likely bred in temple catteries only to be sacrificed as offerings, their necks snapped at just a few months old. The tension between reverence and exploitation played out starkly in religious rites. Aztec nobility kept resplendent Quetzal birds as living ornaments, but also offered them to the gods, plucking their iridescent feathers before sacrifice. The Minoans, who painted dolphins with evident affection, also depicted bulls in scenes of ritual slaughter, a duality that mirrors modern debates about zoos or factory farming. Even pet-keeping manuals from ancient China contained surprising nuance. While Song dynasty aristocrats prized crickets for their songs, treatises warned against overcrowding their cages or pitting them in fights for gambling, with poet Lu Yu lamenting, "To force music from misery is to deafen heaven itself." What's striking is how these ancient contradictions foreshadow today's dilemmas. The same civilization that built the first veterinary clinics in Babylon also staged lion hunts in the Colosseum. The Egyptians, who mourned their dogs with elaborate tombs, also force-fed geese to fatten their livers, an early version of foie gras. These aren't just historical footnotes, they're reminders that our relationship with animals has always been a mirror, reflecting both our capacity for cruelty and our yearning for kindness. Perhaps the most poignant lesson lies in the outliers, those who defied convention. The Greek philosopher Pythagoras allegedly bought fish from markets just to release them, while the Jain monks of India swept paths to avoid crushing insects. Their choices, like the modern animal rights movement, prove that ethics isn't about the era you're born into, but the lines you refuse to cross. When we look back at these ancient struggles, we're not just studying history, we're holding up a flickering torch to our own choices, wondering which practices future generations will view with the same uneasy mix of admiration and disbelief. The process of animal mummification in ancient Egypt was far more than wrapping a creature in linen. It was a blend of sacred ritual and startlingly sophisticated science. Recent CT scans of mummified cats, ibises, and even crocodiles have peeled back the layers of time, revealing techniques so precise they rival modern preservation methods. Take the case of a tiny cat scanned at the British Museum. Its delicate bones showed no signs of trauma, proving it wasn't sacrificed but likely died naturally before being painstakingly dried with natron salt. The embalmers had even arranged its paws in a curled position, as if eternally napping. This wasn't assembly line work, it was an act of tenderness, a glimpse into how deeply these animals were valued. But scale this up, and the picture grows more complex. Beneath the sands of Saqqara lies the Bubastain, a labyrinth of tunnels containing millions of cat mummies. While some show careful preparation, others are merely bundles of linen around fragments, suggesting a bustling industry where demand for sacred offerings sometimes outpaced supply. Yet even here, science reveals surprises. Researchers at the University of Manchester found that some empty bundles actually contained matted fur or whiskers, akin to keeping a lock of a loved one's hair. The Egyptians seemed to understand that symbolism could carry as much weight as physical remains. The real technical marvel, though, was reserved for creatures like the sacred crocodiles of Crocodilopolis. CT scans of a 5-meter-long specimen showed its organs had been replaced with linen packs soaked in resin, a technique previously thought only used for humans. The embalmers even inserted small stones into the abdominal cavity to retain the body's shape, a detail that would have been invisible beneath the wrappings. For pets of the elite, the care was even more personalized. A dog mummy from the Roman period still wears a collar of threaded beads, its teeth worn with age, suggesting it lived a full life before being preserved alongside its owner. What's most striking is how these practices mirror modern grief. The difference between a mass-produced Ibis mummy and a lovingly prepared pet cat parallels today's divide between store-bought sympathy cards and handwritten letters. Both reveal a culture wrestling with how to honor the sacred while making room for the personal. The Egyptians may not have understood microbiology, but their natron drying methods created conditions too hostile for bacteria, allowing these bonds to endure millennia. In the end, their mummies weren't just religious objects or scientific curiosities, they were time capsules of love, crafted by hands that believed some connections shouldn't end with death. It's almost uncanny how the pet trends of antiquity mirror our modern obsessions. Take the Roman obsession with tiny, pampered lapdogs. Their Melodian companions were carried in silk-lined baskets, fed delicacies from the table, and even dressed in miniature coats during winter. Fast forward 2,000 years, and you'll find nearly identical scenes in smartphone videos of purse-sized chihuahuas sporting designer sweaters. The ancient Egyptians, too, would feel right at home in today's pet influencer culture, where cats reign supreme on social media. Their reverence for felines, immortalized in statues and jewelry, finds its digital counterpart in viral videos of cats lounging in sunbeams or knocking over priceless vases, proof that some bonds transcend time and technology. But the parallels run deeper than aesthetics. The Mesopotamians were the first to breed dogs for specific traits, creating swift hunting hounds and sturdy guardians, a practice that evolved into today's meticulous pedigree registries. Even the ancient Chinese penchant for singing crickets has a modern echo in the rise of exotic pet enthusiasts who keep everything from sugar gliders to tarantulas. Yet for all these similarities, the gulf between ancient and modern pet care is vast. Where a Roman might have treated a dog's wound with wine-soaked cloth, we have vaccines, antibiotics, and specialized surgeries. The skeletal remains of medieval lapdogs often show signs of malnutrition or inbreeding, while contemporary veterinary science prioritizes preventative care and genetic diversity. Perhaps the most striking difference lies in our evolving ethical awareness. While the Egyptians mummified millions of cats for religious offerings, and Romans staged brutal animal fights for entertainment, today's societies grapple with animal rights legislation and adoption advocacy. The ancient world viewed pets as property, companions, or even conduits to the divine, but rarely as beings with intrinsic rights. Modern movements like cage-free breeding bans and anti-declawing laws reflect a seismic shift in perspective, one that acknowledges animals as individuals deserving of dignity. That's not to say antiquity lacked compassion. The grief etched into Roman epitaphs for pets or the careful burials of Viking horses reveals genuine affection. But the tools to express that love have transformed. Where an Assyrian trainer might have relied on instinct to bond with a falcon, we now have behavioral science and positive reinforcement techniques. Ancient pet owners couldn't Google, "Why does my parrot pluck its feathers?" They relied on folklore or trial and error. What emerges from this comparison isn't just a timeline of progress, but a reflection of humanity itself. Our urge to connect with animals hasn't changed, but our ability to understand and protect them has grown exponentially. The next time you scratch your dog behind the ears or admire a viral video of a tricks-performing parrot, remember, you're part of a tradition stretching back to the dawn of civilization, but with tools and knowledge those early pet lovers could never have imagined. From the sacred cats of Egypt to the loyal dogs of Rome, pets and animals have been our companions for thousands of years. They've curled up by our fires, guarded our thresholds, and nestled into the quiet corners of our lives, leaving paw prints on history itself. Think about the Minoan girl whispering secrets to her pet monkey, or the Roman child burying his face in his dog's fur after a long day, these moments feel startlingly familiar, don't they? That's because the bond we share with animals isn't just a footnote in history. It's one of humanity's oldest, most enduring stories. The roles these creatures played were as varied as the cultures that cherished them. In Egypt, cats were living extensions of the divine, their sleek forms embodying the grace of Bastet. In Rome, dogs weren't just protectors, they were confidants, their names etched into tombstones with the same tenderness we use when posting tributes to lost pets today. And who could forget the Chinese emperors who carried Pekingese in their sleeves, treating them like tiny, breathing jewels? These weren't just quirks of ancient life. They were reflections of values, beliefs, and the universal need for companionship. Yet what's truly remarkable is how little the core of this relationship has changed. When your cat sprawls across your keyboard or your dog greets you with uncontrollable joy, you're participating in a ritual as old as civilization itself. The Egyptians would recognize the way we spoil our pets with treats and toys, just as a Viking might nod in approval at the pride we take in training our dogs. The mediums have shifted, linen collars have become GPS trackers, and clay mouse toys are now plush squeaky mice, but the heartbeat of the bond remains the same. So what will future historians say about our era? Perhaps they'll note how we've turned pet care into a billion-dollar industry with gourmet food and designer outfits. Maybe they'll marvel at our efforts to extend animal rights, or chuckle at the endless viral videos of cats knocking over Christmas trees. But one thing's certain, millennia from now, when someone uncovers a faded photo of a child hugging their golden retriever, or digs up a ceramic bowl inscribed with "Best Dog Ever," they'll understand. They'll see that across time and cultures, through pyramids and skyscrapers, one truth endures: we are, and always have been, richer for the creatures who choose to share our lives. Now it's your turn. What pets do you think will define our age in the history books? A particularly opinionated parrot, a TikTok famous hamster? Drop your thoughts below, and if you've enjoyed this journey through the ancient world of pets, hit subscribe for more adventures where history comes to life. Until next time, keep an eye on your own furry, feathered, or scaly time travelers. Who knows, they might just be the next chapter in this incredible story.